I thought that they were looking at me as I was a terrorist. And I lived in here all my life, was an employee for the city of Chicago for 33 years with the Chicago Fire Department. And looking at me, I don't think I fit the profile of a terrorist. The clerk informed me that they couldn't give me a license. The information they had with other agencies in the government didn't correspond to what I was giving them. It's funny how everybody is concerned about the security of the country, and yet it's like the government threw this big thing onto the shoulders of the state and the cities. And I don't think they're qualified or trained to respond to what the government wants. So I was very aware every day I got into the car that I am, driving on an expired license because I didn't want to be pulled over. I would have to be arrested.
There is also open rebellion over a new law requiring a national driver's license. Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner calls this revolt a threat to national security. He's among our guests here. Stay with us. Intended to help prevent another terrorist attack, introducing a national driver's license. Now, at least 7 states have begun efforts to avoid that law. And joining me now, the author of the Real ID Act, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner. Congressman, good to have you here. What is your reaction to those states who are trying to exempt their residents from the Real ID Act?
Well, they say it's a national driver's license, and it's not.
Right.
It's optional amongst the states. If the states want to have their driver's licenses be valid for federal ID purposes, they've got to do a couple things. One is to make sure that the people they issue those licenses to are legally present in the country. And secondly, they've got to check to make sure that somebody does not have a valid driver's license issued by another state.
Right.
This is not just an anti-terrorism action. We do know that the 9/11 hijackers had multiple driver's licenses from 5 states, but it's public safety as well.
Mandatory federal standards for issuing driver's licenses. The Department of Homeland Security is expected to issue new guidelines this week, and states have just over a year to put them in place. Now, Jean Meserve tells us why states are putting up resistance to the law.
After 9/11, Congress mandated tough new federal standards for driver's licenses called Real ID. States are supposed to implement them in little more than a year. Every one of the 245 million license holders in the United States will have to reapply in person with documents that prove they are citizens or legal residents. The states predict it will swamp motor vehicle offices, creating long waits. Currently, each state issues licenses following their own security standards and with their own features.
They have no business in our state's business, and that's what they're doing.
Arizona State Senator Karen Johnson is sponsoring legislation saying her state will not comply. She says Real ID would invade privacy by creating a large national database of driver information.
I mean, Homeland Security is the one that's going to be running this database. Give me a break.
Arizona is one of 24 states that has passed or proposed legislation opposing Real ID. The big complaint, the cost, an estimated $11 billion over 5 years. The biggest expense is likely to be a requirement that states verify the authenticity of identity documents used to get a license.
It's verification that not even the federal government can complete for its own employees.
Roddy Marshall just got his license renewed in Phoenix in 20 minutes. If Real ID lengthens his wait, it's fine with him.
I don't think everybody should just automatically get a driver's license. If it takes a day of your time, that's what it takes.
Homeland Security is taking an even harder line.
If we don't get it done now, someone's going to be sitting around in 3 or 4 years explaining to the next 9/11 Commission why we didn't do it.
Because the next person who tries to get a driver's license may want to do harm to the country.
Rudy Giuliani had a line last night that I'm not sure many people noticed, but it had to do with a national ID card. It was within the context of a debate about immigration, and he said we need a tamper-proof ID card and a database that figures out who they are, immigrants, why they're here, and whether or not they're legal. That's a national ID card. Are you for that?
Absolutely not. I voted against the Real ID. I think the Real ID is the national ID card. It's essentially going to be introducing the notion that we will be carrying our papers. You can't do that, gather that much information in an ID card for illegal aliens or Hispanics and not include everybody. It just doesn't make any sense. So the age of carrying our papers and national IDs, it's here, and I am concerned about that. It's all done in the name of safety. Everybody's frightened to death, and if you don't sacrifice your liberties, you can't be safe. And yet the dangers exist, but they're not quite bad enough, and they never should be bad enough to sacrifice liberty. There's no reason to sacrifice liberty in thinking that you're going to be safer.